Hey there, Marshall here from Limited Resources doing a depth check video with you. This one is for Aether Revolt Limited. Let's get right into the draft here. Peace Walker Colossus it's kind of just okay. I'm not in love with the card. It can do some cool stuff, but it's pretty conditional and not overly powerful. I like these two blue cards here quite a bit. Leopard's fine, Cruel Finality's fine, Welder's fine. This isn't a great pack to open. I do think I want to take one of maybe these cards here in the middle. I'll go for an Aether Swooper. I think that card's performed pretty well for me, and I don't know, I'll give it a shot. We'll see what happens. Well, here's an easy one if we want to just stay in blue, and yeah, I think we do. I mean, I love a Druid of the Cowl. Leaving the Dust is good, but let's just take another Aether Swooper. They work well together. More energy. We'll see if we can make that maybe a sub-theme or even a main theme of the deck. It doesn't happen very often in Aether Revolt draft that you get an actual energy deck. You'll have some energy cards floating around, but the deck usually falls off as far as the energy theme goes. But it can happen. What do we have here? There's a Druid of the Cowl, Frontline Rebel and Implement, an Aeronaut Admiral. We could just take that guy and just try to be blue-white Flyers deck, or we could take green and try to kind of power out more stuff. Why don't we take this Admiral? It's not a great card, but you know, a 3-powered flyer for 4 does hit pretty hard, assuming that you can get stuff out of the way. And occasionally the vehicle thing comes up too, though. Generally speaking, I don't value that super highly, as vehicles are usually difficult to block anyway. Yes, you can chump block them, but you know, if you're attacking with a vehicle and your opponent's chump blocking, you're probably in decent shape anyway. So I view this as an upside, but not an amazing reason to play Aeronaut Admiral. Okay, here we've got a Dawnfeather Eagle, I think is our best choice. There's also a Shock and a Sweatworks Brawler, signaling that red may be slightly open here, so we'll keep our eye on it. But I really like Dawnfeather Eagle as a card, and it goes in our deck very well. Not only is it good with other flyers, and literally every card we have so far has flying, by the way, but also even just with the servos, you know, they can add up some extra damage on the ground too. So right now we're trying to be blue-white Flyers, and we're doing a pretty good job of it, all flying so far. Ooh, sweet. On-color gold uncommon. That is about as good as it gets. So I'm going to snap up a Spire Patrol here. And by the way, we are somehow 5 for 5 on flying creatures. I like this. All right. Let's just keep it rolling, I guess. I don't know how this is happening, but yeah, this is where we're at. When I said blue-eyed Flyers, I meant it. All right, we're finally going to play something that doesn't have flying. And I don't know what to pick here. I like Consulate Dreadnought a lot. We actually have a reasonable number of 3-powered creatures, so I maybe could take it, though it doesn't fit particularly well in our strategy, as we really are looking to take the heirs. But you know how that works. It doesn't always pan out that way, and a card like this can be very powerful. I also could just take a Conviction, which is a pretty good card against some decks, or a Bastion Inventor, which is just solid as well. We have not a ton of artifacts, but some. I'll take the Bastion Inventor here. Wow, another Consulate Dreadnought. That's insane. I think I want Reverse Engineer, but Audacious Infiltrator is interesting as well. It's just a good 2-drop that blocks well and can pile in some damage. But I am going to take Reverse Engineer here. This is a type of card that is hard to replace. A 2-drop attacker on the ground, even if it's a decent one like Audacious Infiltrator, is easy to replace ultimately. Like, here's one now, for example. So I'll just play this guy. But Reverse Engineer is a card that's difficult to get. It is a type of card that can really bail you out of some tough spots. So I'll take it here. Obviously, we haven't picked up any removal yet or any way to interact with our opponent's board, which is something that we'll be looking for pretty hard. Here's something, a Decommission. I usually will run the first Decommission, so we'll probably end up playing this one too. All right, I suppose I'll take a Dispersal Technician, though I have not been impressed by it, so I'll leave it in the sideboard for now. And I'll take an Implement of Improvement. Well, it looks like if we face a heavy artifact deck, we'll be in good shape. And there's 2 Implements of Improvement. That makes our Bastion Inventor a lot better. I like actually picking those up quite a bit. Cheap, easy way to get a card back. You don't need a target for it. The the life gain can be important, and it really helps you churn through your deck or power out a Bastion Inventor. Maybe if we get another one of these, or an uncommon like a Winkin Raiders or something like that, then those implements can be really good for our deck and really great to pick them up super late. Ooh, Tezzeret. Huh. There's also a pacification array here, which is very good. What else? Rebuke, no. So it's between these two. We could certainly just splash Tezzeret. We will need to find a way to do that. But there are plenty of ways to do it. Or we could just take Pacification Array, which is just a really good card. I think I want to take Tezzeret. I like Tezzeret. It's more fun. Oof. Wow, now we get the business. So we hope to wheel this Hinterland Drake, but in the meantime, we can take any of these three and be pretty happy. I think we want Baral's Expertise. I like Airdrop Aeronauts and I like Felidar Guardian, but this is actually the deck where Baral's Expertise is fantastic. On the whole, it's actually disappointed me. I haven't actually liked Baral's Expertise nearly as much as I thought it would, but this is the deck where it's fantastic. It just wipes away their board and lets you get in that one big hit in the air with your flyers and to finish up the game. So I'm really happy to pick up a Baral's Expertise there. We'll still see about Tezzeret. I've found Tezzeret to be very good. But we do need to make sure that we can actually cast him reasonably. So we'll see. All right, what do we have here? Well, Gifted Aetherborn's a nice one, but not for us. Salvage Scuttler doesn't look great in our deck. We've already got 5s we want to play, so I think I'm just going to take this Gear per Osprey. We could take the Iron Tread Crusher. It does hit pretty hard. It doesn't work perfectly with what we're doing, though, and I do think just more flyers is probably the name of the game here, so I'm just going to take that. There's another one, which I do think is the pick. It could be Cogwork Assembler. But again, trying to keep on the Flyers theme, I think I'd like to take this and hope to wheel like a Shipwreck Moray or something like that. So I'll take the Gear per Osprey. Ooh, a third Swooper, a Leave in the Dust, or an Airdrop Aeronauts. These are all good. I'm going to take the big flyer. I think that you could make an argument for all three of these and be pretty reasonable. The Aeronauts have been fine. They haven't really blown me away, but I really like the idea of putting another big flyer in our deck. I think that's a high priority for us. Another Aeronaut Admiral. I'd take removal over it, but I don't want to take an Osprey over it, so I'll take it. Ice over or another Osprey? That's an interesting decision. I think I'm going to take the Ice over. We really just don't have any way to interact, and this one's an okay one. Like when your opponent's trying to race you on the ground, an Ice over can do some work, so we'll take it. Feels like every pack's the same. It's all convictions and decommissions. There's a Whir of Invention, which doesn't really do what we want, though I will take a Barricade Breaker here because this is a card that has a decent chance of making the cut, depending on what we end up with for artifacts. I'll take a Metallic Rebuke. All right, the Drake wheeled, so we got lucky there. I'm really happy about that. The second Hinterland Drake's really nice for this deck, so that's really good. Still don't really want Shelly here. All right, we wheeled the Shipwreck Moray. I'm happy about that. Guy's a pretty good blocker on the ground. It also just makes a ton of energy for our 2 Aether Swoopers. Play this turn 4, attack with one of those, make another 1/1, still have this guy back. It's pretty good. Don't think we're going to main deck the Crawler, but it's not impossible that it makes the cut. It's just very unlikely. Third Dispersal Technician. All right. Well, if we face down a heavy artifacts deck, they're in big trouble, but otherwise, no. All right, so what do we want out of this last pack? Well, a few more 2-drops would be good. And then we do need some removal. We do. We need some way to interact with our opponent's creatures. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but we do need to be able to get them. Well, that's pretty good. Fairgrounds Warden, not bad at that. So yeah, we'll probably just take that out of this pack. What else am I missing out on? Nothing. A Harrier, a Metalwork Colossus, whatever. All right, so Fairgrounds Warden, good start to pack 3. Hopefully we'll pick up, ideally 2 more removal spells would be great. just because we are so low on them, or at least 2 more creature interaction spells, and then just otherwise power level stuff, and then and maybe a couple of 2-drops, and we're good to go. All right, what do we have here? An Aether Theorist, sure. That fits the bill perfectly. That is one of the I mentioned I wanted good 2-drops. This one blocks well on the ground and has a relevant ability, plus gives us extra energy for our swoopers. So I like that a lot. That's a solid pickup for our deck. It's not super high power level, but it was one of the things that I wanted. I wanted removal, 2-drops, and then just the rest is power level picks. So I'll take 2-drop. I really want this Restoration Gearsmith, but Tezzeret's already looking sketchy enough here, so I'm going to take the Consul's Shield Guard over like Fragmentizer and Ibex. If I had a Renegade map, I'd probably spring for the Gearsmith, but I do not. Okay, here's an interesting one. We've got a Dukara Peafowl, which is just a solid, it's a good blocker and it can get in the air. Or we could go for the Longfin Sky Whale. We're trying to be a Flyers deck here. I think I'm going to take the Sky Whale. This might actually just be the deck for it. God, another one of these. Ugh. I'm going to take Fragmentize, though. Pack's not super strong for us there. Ooh. I like a Whisperweaver Angel. A Consulate Skygate would also be good in this deck. I think it's close between the two. But the Angel is powerful enough that we should probably just pick it up here. We have plenty of creatures, so we will be cutting some creatures here, but yeah, Acrobatic Maneuver, fine. I doubt we'll end up making the cut, just simply because when you look at it, we've already got too many playables and need to cut a bunch of creatures. I don't think I want that guy. I might actually. I've got 2 implements. Maybe I do. This card's actually pretty good for us. It can't attack, and what that means is that we can put it on a ground creature that we're going to attack over in the air anyway, because it can still block. And it can be pretty annoying for that card to be out. So I like picking that up. A Harrier, but I feel like we're already pretty stacked up here. I'll take this Thriving Turtle. Another Fragmentize. Okay, well, we wield the Peafowl. I could also take Cogworker's Puzzle Knot instead. If I did, I could probably play this guy. Yeah, I'll try that. It's just we have to cut stuff. Like, we've just got too many things going on here. Don't think we want Tezzeret's Ambition. I think that I'm quite happy with just Reverse Engineer instead. All right, so we've got 30 cards. We need to cut a bunch. Maybe one of those guys goes. I mean, we're not getting anything in the air with these. They're just 3/1 flyers for 4, which are fine. Maybe I just kiss this plan goodbye and go like this. This looks like a pretty reasonable deck. We've got a pair of Fragmentize. We've got triple Dispersal Technician. We can play the long game if it ends up being super grindy where our opponent's just killing everything. Unfortunately, Tezzeret's going to be on the bench here. I don't want to just cold splash. I mean, I could justify it in some ways by playing like 2 swamps or something and say, well, look, I can get through here and I'm going to draw cards and maybe I can just play them for free, but I don't like doing that. This deck is a pretty good deck and I don't want to mess that up. All right, so let's get some lands in here. 8 and 8, that seems fine to me. We've got white pretty early, but heavy blue as well. All right. There it is. Blue-White Flyers, Modern Edition. Let's see what it can do. Match 1, Game 1, we have a reasonable opening hand, which we end up keeping. Nothing super exciting here, a little bit slow, but maybe we can find some action. Opponent starts off on a forest. Oh, this isn't bad. We find ourselves, well, basically a card here. I'm just going to crack this implement right away. This lets us leave up decommission, but we don't really have a target for it yet. Okay, there's one of the best targets for it right away. So we take that down and then curve into our 4-drop 3/1 Flying Admiral. 4 pass in a turn, but our opponent has a big play, a 4/4. And our only really good play here is just to draw a bunch of cards, which is fine. We attack for 3 since we're not going to block anyway. And we kind of initiate a race at this point. Opponent plays 3/2, sometimes Menace, World Fast Monitor, and we have to map out what we want to do for our turn here. We ultimately can play 2 flying creatures, and that's what we decide to do. We play both the Hinterland Drake as well as the Swooper, and then pass a turn back. Though we do know that that means we're taking a big hit of damage. 7 damage hits us as our opponent plays a Scrap Trawler, but we have a really nice draw here. Check out this play. We get to play out this Eagle, and then also leave up Metallic Rebuke, which proves to be absolutely critical here. Now, the only reason we can leave up Rebuke is because we do get to make a servo, but that leaves us with just enough mana and improvise to be able to get the job done here. So we pass back, our opponent tanks, and they put Angel of Invention on the stack. Of course, we Metallic Rebuke that, and that's enough to earn the concession. All right, game number 2, we do a little bit of sideboarding here, bringing in a Fragmentize for a Long-Finned Skywhale, a creature that can't block particularly well. And we do need some blockers in this matchup. So we have a slow start once again. Nothing crazy going on, but we've got a couple of nice 4-drops and a couple of nice 5-drops in our hand, plus an Ice Over. Opponent starts things out with a nice big 4/4 Trampler. But we decide just to get aggressive here and lock it down for a turn, start getting in for damage. But our opponent has a really nice turn. They play an Outland Boar and a Prey Upon in the same turn to kill our potent flyer. We decide to play a Shipwreck Moray here, as it really is the only thing that can block effectively. I can either pump it up and block to trade for the Boar, or I can just block the Pima Outrider. I decide just to block the Outrider here and soak up the 4 damage. Falling down to 16, I've got my implement out, and I feel okay about it. I do need to get some type of air assault going, though, if I'm going to make this work. This turn, though, I decide to sacrifice my implement because I can use up all my mana no matter what, and I might hit a land drop. So I lock down the Boar, and I sack the implement, and I also play an Aether Swooper. I'm trying to set up. I just keep blocking with this eel. Unfortunately, this time my opponent has impeccable timing to kill it, and I can't activate in response to save it because the damage is already on it. So I get in with the Aether Swooper, and then I decide to go big here and just play out the big 4/3 flying airdrop Aeronauts. My opponent attacks us down to 14, and then plays their own 2/2 here. No big deal, though. I draw a bunch of cards on my turn and set up to take a pretty big hit here. I fall down to 8, but I get to leave up a Metallic Rebuke, and my opponent doesn't play anything. So on my turn, I attack with everybody. And I have to decide how I want to approach this turn. I decide to lock down the big 4/4 Trampler and then just go ahead and put out the best blocker that I can. I'm not going to leave up Metallic Rebuke when my opponent has this much mana available and has failed to make a big play last turn. That means that they're for sure top decking and my opponent concedes. Match 2, game number 1, has a reasonable opener with a little 3-drop into 4-drop, but boom, we find a nice 2 right off the top. The ideal, in fact, Aether Swooper. We're going to go ahead and play that and see what our opponent does. Looks like they've got a whole bunch of cheap artifacts going, but no real payoff at the moment, as the Ravenous Intruder is not really such a big threat. We play a Gyriper Osprey, and already we've got a little bit going in the air with 3 power, plus a little chump blocker probably down on the ground. We are considering the Metallic Rebuke in our hand, but oftentimes it's more important for these blue-white decks to curve out and get their Air Force online and then protect it using Metallic Rebuke rather than sitting back and trying to react to what your opponent's doing. Pima Aether Seer from our opponent looks pretty good, as they can force some of our flyers potentially to block. We're going to go ahead and just get in with both of them anyway. and even make ourselves an additional servo. This way, our opponent can't pick off a servo with the Aether Seer. We get the double block in that scenario. Here, though, they patiently wait for their Renegade map to cast their Lifecalf Cavalry, and they get a big 6/6 Trampler, which is a pretty big problem for our deck. We don't have a whole lot of ways to protect against it. Here, though, not too bad. We get to leave Metallic Rebuke up, but unfortunately, our opponent has a good on-board play here with using the Pima Aether Seer and attacking with both. And then, of course, the Precise Strike is enough to kill our creatures as well, and we can't counter that. But we do get to counter the Wayward Giant, but now we're kind of out of gas here, and we have to try to figure out how we're going to win this game. Our opponent's at 13 life, and they've got a superior board state to us, at least at the moment here. We decided to leave back our smaller creatures because they do good blocking duty on the guys on the ground, and just attack with everything else in the air to knock our opponent to 10. We're kind of picking a fight here, but it doesn't feel like sitting back and waiting is going to benefit us. Unfortunately, Furious Reprisal kills our 2 attacking threats and puts us in a really bad position. We draw a nice one, a lot of cards from Reverse Engineer, but unfortunately, we can't really deploy them quickly enough. We knock our opponent down to 7 and put up a couple of blockers for their future attack, but we're already in chump block mode here. Things are starting to slip away quite quickly from us here. We go for chumps and trades, but the Longfin Skywhale doesn't look so hot on this board, and unfortunately the Aether Swooper looks a little bit small too. So we're done here. I decide just to go ahead and attack and send in my team because, hey, why not? Sometimes your opponent will play around weird stuff or make a mistake, and they actually chump blocked on that turn, but it didn't matter. They attack for lethal the next turn. Okay, match 2, game 2, and we have a reasonable opener once again. Nothing super exciting, but we've got a ways to kind of work our way through and find our land drops, which is what we want to hit here. We've got Decommissioned that can take care of some pesky things, and boom, we hit our 3-drop right on time. Hinterland Drake is ready to rumble, and we get to curve that right into an Aeronaut Admiral. So boom, just like that, turn 4, we've got 5 power in the air versus no board. Pima Aether Seer is fine, but we get to play right into this Dawnfeather Eagle, and our opponent's suddenly at 11 life and falling behind very, very quickly. They play a Lifecraft Cavalry, which is a nice one, and cash in their Pima Aether Seer to take out our Aeronaut Admiral. But in the meantime, we've kind of got that Air Force really rolling here. We get to draw 3 more cards. Unfortunately, they're all lands, but we knock our opponent to 6 and pass the turn. And at 22, it's just very difficult for our opponent to actually try to race us here. And boom. Spire Patrol off the top's a nice one as well. We can knock our opponent down to 1, lock down their biggest threat, still play a Spire Patrol and take no damage. And now we've got 3 lethal threats, and that's just enough for anybody to deal with, and we take down the game. All right, that brings us to game 3 of our second match. We're going to be on the draw here after having won the first game. We've got a pretty good opening hand, but we do need a threat. We're going to have to settle for a Hinterland Drake early in the game, which is fine. That tends to be our most typical time to first start laying threats. If we don't draw our Swooper, we're a lot of 3-drops in this deck. We decide just to go ahead and take the damage here. We don't want to trade our Drake for a Renegade map. Our opponent has a nice curve, though, here with the Boar. We go ahead and get in for damage and then play the Longfin Skywhale. So this is going to be a race, and we know it straight away because we can't even block this turn at all, and our opponent hits maximum damage 9 and then curves into a 5-drop as well. So things are not looking great for us in the early stages, but you know what? We can crack back here as well. So we go ahead and jam in there with both the Whale and the Drake, knocking our opponent to 10. They put up a near lethal attack. We decide to go for the double block on the Menace Giant here, and they take down one of our flyers and then play nothing. Now this is a huge decision point in the game. All right, so the first option here is to play, well, we can play Airdrop Aeronauts, attack to set up lethal the next turn, probably with just the Skywhale. The upside, of course, is that the Aeronauts can block the Outland Boar, where the Longfin Skywhale and either Hinterland Drake cannot. Our other option to look at here, though, is to play the Hinterland Drake, attack for 6 in the air with both of our flyers, leaving up Metallic Rebuke. We cannot block the Boar, so we're dead to many things, including anything that does 1 damage, any removal spell, any combat trick kills us because we'd be at virtual 1. We can, of course, block the other creature. I decide to take option 1. It looks like it's a little bit safer of a route. There's a lot of things that can be responsible to get in just for even a single point of damage in this format, and I just don't want to leave myself open to it. Of course, it does mean that we're going to lose our airdrop aeronauts, and if one of our other creatures were to die, we may see this one slip away, but that's a risk I'm willing to take. I also don't think that leaving up Metallic Rebuke has a ton of value here, because a lot of the cards we care about cost either 1, 2, or 3 mana anyway, if we take that line. So instead, I have to line up my attackers here, and I decide that my best course of action is just to attack with the Longfin Sky Whale. This gives me an additional blocker. It doesn't significantly change our clock, as I'm planning on blocking with my 4/3 here, and then that would give us 6 power in the air. Our opponent actually attacks with both creatures, and I just go for the both blocks here, and that seems to get the job done, because my opponent's only play is a big fat 5-drop, but it doesn't matter because we've got 6 damage in the air, and we fly over for the win. Match 3, game 1 underway here, as we have another reasonable opener. We're kind of leaning on these implements pretty often to make sure that we can get our land drops and keep things flowing, but they tend to do a pretty good job of that, and this one even gives you a nice little life cushion. So off to the races here, and we've got, of course, the Hinterland Drake on turn 3 and a Spire Patrol on 4 if we can hit a land, which we just did, so that's pretty nice. Our opponent, green-white, starts things off with SRAM. Oof, SRAM can do some serious work if left unchecked, and our deck does have a pretty tough job of actually taking care of SRAM. So as usual, we're going to try to race. So here we go. We get in there and block SRAM, but we know that there's a trick of some way coming here, but that's okay. We're willing to trade off a trick at that point in the game rather than just starting to fall too far behind. Unfortunately for us, we do get our clock on the air, but it gets immediately taken care of by Caught in the Brights, and that draws a card for our opponent as well. So we use Baral's expertise to return our Spire Patrol. And instead of putting it back into play, we decide just to put our 3/4 Consulate Shield Guard down, as it can block better. Our opponent plays Call for Unity, but I've never found that card to be very impressive at all. So we just go ahead and lock down a blocker and then curve out by attacking for 3 and playing an Aether Swooper. Now check out this turn, though. This is completely absurd. Our opponent goes from having just 2 creatures on the board to playing Felidar Guardian, blinking, and then getting not only that, but also a Countless Gears Renegade. And on top of that, Call for Unity triggers. This is what their board looked like when they started the turn. This was it. They had 4 power, and half of it was tapped down for the turn. By the time they end, just off of playing those 2 cards, boom! Look at their board here. It's absurd. They've got a 3/3, 2 power, 3 power, another 3 power, another 2/2, and they've really exploded, and they've put the ball in our court. We need to race. We know that. So we put up another flyer, and we brace ourselves for a big attack, but for some reason our opponent doesn't do it, and that means that we get the time that we need. We play Metallic Rebuke on their big flyer, and that clears the way for a monstrous attack in the air. And now at 15 life with a bunch of chump blockers on the ground, even if our opponent gets super aggressive, we've got a bunch of good blocks and multiple lethal in the air, so they scoop them up. For sideboarding, we decided to bring in a Dispersal Technician, and I'd end up taking out an Ice Over just to see how that works out for us a little bit more on the ground, and then that bounce could be useful. This is not a fantastic opener for us. A bunch of 4-drops in our hand and an Aether Swooper, but if we hit blue mana, we'll be in good shape. So we decide to go ahead and keep it, and boom, right on time, blue mana off the top. So lucky, must be nice, is. And we kind of start working our game plan forward here. We still need to hit another land to be able to cast any spells, though, as we did have a pretty rough keep there. The opponent curving out reasonably, and so are we. We hit our lands. I go for Spire Patrol and decide just to go ahead and lock down the mana source. I figure if they didn't have anything they could do, then we'll just stop them for a full another turn potentially. But the truth is that they were leaving up mana for Death Dismissal. That's what was going on. And now I'm getting concerned that we're going to start losing the race here, being already behind on damage. So I go ahead and just trade off for the 3/3 and start looking at the big attack that our opponent's throwing at us here. I decide to use my Consul Shield Guard to block their mana once again. Their Druid, they actually 2-for-1 themselves with impeccable timing to get rid of our 3/4, but the board keeps flowing for them as all of a sudden they've got 5 power out. We can really only have one reasonable play here, and unfortunately it's just a Agariper Osprey. This time, though, we find a reasonable blocker here. This can take care of the Pima Outrider here, so we go ahead and fire up a block here. And we decide just to play a little safe here and block the 2/2 and pump, which seems like we give up a little bit of life, but it's kind of free, and it worked out pretty well for us there. They just threw away their 2/2 to get in for 4 extra damage. And we decide here to play our Longfin Sky Whale just to try to get something going in the air, but it backfires pretty hard when our opponents find themselves the big nasty there. The Oval Chase Dragster gets in and really kind of seals our fate here. We don't have very many good blocks. We line up one that keeps us alive, but we're at 1 life, and there's not much we can do from this position. So I go ahead and just might as well run this out in case my opponent decides that they don't want to attack us. That unfortunately doesn't happen, and they take down the game. Okay, time for game 3. It's an exciting finish too. We've got a good hand with a 1-drop into a 2-drop. The implement even lets us draw a card at some point. We decide, well, it seems like as good a time as any as we've got nothing else going on. We find a Metallic Rebuke, which is really nice because we can actually cast it, and we do. So this has been a very good start, and one of our better cards, Baral's Expertise off the top. We decide, of course, to develop our board with flyers first, and then we make pretty good aggressive play here. We decide just to go for it and go for Baral's Expertise, bouncing both creatures. Remember, you can do any number that you want and just playing the gear per Osprey for free. This puts us way ahead on board, and our opponent falls down to 12. They rebuild their board a little bit on the ground, but of course we don't care about that as much as beating down in the air. And that's exactly what we do, knocking our opponent to 6. And these next few turns are going to be the ones that determine who wins the match here in the finals. Our opponent plays Airdrop Aeronauts, and we've got an interesting choice here. Ultimately, we're looking to race on the ground. Our opponent has 3 cards, we have 2, and we really, really want to get their life total down to 0. If we attack with every creature we have here, we would attack in, assuming that they block the 2/2, then that would put them down to 2, and we have an additional creature that is lethal. So this gives us 2 different lethal threats in the air. And is it going to be enough? No, it's not. Felidar Guardian is going to blink the Aeronauts, putting them back up to 7. And our game plan is really starting to fall apart on us here. We attack for 3. And that gets Death Dismissaled, and things are looking horrible for us all of a sudden. We're taking damage on the ground. Our opponent is doing good work, but we rip Spire Patrol off the top, a huge top deck, tapping down our opponent's only flying blocker, knocking them to 4, and we've got exactly 4 worth of flying. Does our opponent have anything? No, they don't. And we win the draft. And that's going to do it for this LR depth check. I wanted to say thank you to the patrons who make these possible. You can visit patreon.com/limited resources to find out more information. And just by way of lessons, make sure that you keep your eyes open for different archetypes. This blue-white deck doesn't pop up that often, but it can be quite powerful when it does, as long as you know the game plan and how to play it. Hopefully you learned something from that. If you want to find me on social media, I'm Marshall_LR, and we'll see you next time.